Why was Posse Comitatus first put into effect, first passed?
You know, that's a good question. I don't remember. I mean, it's unfortunate I don't remember. But it had to do, it goes back to our constitutional, the original convention, I mean, the original Constitution, that one of the biggest fears is that you don't want the military operating in a democracy, because the military is not trained in constitutional rights. They're trained to go in and kill and destroy, and that's what they do in a country. And so it was really, it came out of really the amendments that said you can't quarter soldiers in your houses, all those kinds, that kind of push that we don't want the military enforcing law in this country.
Go on through the memos that have now been released.
Well, I said that a key memo is this one that we've been discussing, this one that the military can operate in the United States. I mean, as I said, that's really, you know, I used to talk about Führer's law when I talked about the president. Everybody thought I'm exaggerating. Führer's law is where what the Führer, Hitler, said, that's the law. And what these memos do is essentially say that what Bush says is the law. So that's memo number one. There's another memo here on extraordinary rendition. We've discussed it here before. That's where you send people overseas for torture. You nab them or grab them in Pakistan or Afghanistan, send them to another country where it's more likely than not where they'll be tortured. And these memos go through why the argument they make is that that's not against the law, that the Convention Against Torture doesn't apply, and the anti-torture statute, you know, can be avoided by not having the intent to carry out torture. So they essentially authorize sending people for torture. Then two of the memos, and this is pretty interesting, actually concern Jose Padilla. Jose Padilla, you remember, got off the plane in Chicago, the so-called dirty bomber, never charged with that. And when he's in a prison, the military comes to the prison door, they knock, maybe they knock, and they say, give us Jose Padilla, and they grab him. This is in America. This is in the United States. And they take him, and for 5 years, they put him in a military brig. Two of the memos justify and say the president had the power to do that to Jose Padilla, an American citizen living in the United States, that the military could come in and get him. Then a couple of these memos go to what parts that we haven't yet seen exposed, which I think will be a broad and vast intelligence effort in the United States, surveillance effort done by the Department of Defense under the auspices of these memos to essentially surveil and look into what all of us are doing in the United States. That hasn't come out yet completely, but it's going to be in these memos. And there's another memo on the warrantless wiretapping that essentially says the commander-in-chief can carry out warrantless wiretapping as his commander-in-chief power. And let's look at what these memos were built on. You know, first you have the question of, are we at war at all? So first you have this questionable proposition that the war against al-Qaeda, so-called war against al-Qaeda, or the global war on terror is a war at all, or shouldn't this be really a legal operation in which people are arrested and charged? So my position, of course, is this should have been done under law. But so they first make a questionable assumption about war, and then once they call it a war, they then say, well, the president's the commander-in-chief, and under war, commander-in-chief power, he can do whatever he wants. So even had this been a Second World War, he couldn't have the power that he's asserting here. I have to say that, you know, to see these memos, to put it into that they were actually instrumentalized, this is not just theoretical. This is what was happening here for 8 years, essentially a dictatorship. And then to see the response of many of the Democrats here to saying, oh, well, let's just expose it and turn the page. I mean, what we're saying is that's the way it's going to happen again, because unless you prosecute people, there's no deterrence for not doing this again. And it's out there, it's public. If you're going to do a commission, and I'm opposed completely to the Leahy type, if you're going to do one, you can't bury the issue of prosecution. You have to appoint a special prosecutor and make sure a commission of inquiry works together, because a commission can tear up and finish off prosecutions by giving immunity.
And Michael, the prime author of these memos, John Yoo, what happened to him? He went back for a while, left the Bush administration, went back to Berkeley Law School to teach. What's happened with him since?
First of all, I think that these memos, these most recent ones, shred any semblance, any scintilla of reputation that John Yoo ever had, that he was doing something in essentially an honest way. I mean, this finishes his reputation. I think the questions we're faced with are: is he going to be disbarred, and is he going to be prosecuted? And it's interesting, two of the memos, which I didn't mention, were issued by Stephen Bradbury, who was head of the office that John Yoo was formerly in, the Office of Legal Counsel. And those memos they were done within a few weeks of the Bush administration leaving office. In fact, one within a week of him leaving office, essentially in a relatively mealy-mouthed way, saying he cautions against looking at the Yoo memos, that they shouldn't, the OLC doesn't really agree with them anymore. But he has a footnote in there saying, to protect the John Yoos of the world, saying, I think all of those prior memos, referring to the John Yoo memos, were done, did not violate professional responsibility, because it's recognized that currently there's a investigation going on of John Yoo, and I think it's very, and Bradbury himself, and I think it's very likely that that's going to come out and say certainly disciplinary, if not disbarment, for those guys. So I think Yoo is facing that, and as I said, prosecution. Now, his geographical travels, of course, have been, as you said, he went to Berkeley, which is, he described a couple of days ago at a speech in Orange County as made up of a bunch of hippies and radicals. That's his former law school, or it's still his law school. And there's been a push to get rid of him at the law school. I think he finally realizes he can't stay there, so he's teaching at some, I guess, a very conservative law school in Orange County, which is, of course, the heart of law schools and others that are very conservative. So he's slowly being cornered, The one thing I should say about you, and even about the Leahy hearings, while I think they're a bad idea, I think one thing that could come out of them, which Rifkin, the conservative commentator, made a good point on, he says, you're going to expose the stuff on the record, and then while he didn't use the name of the Center for Constitutional Rights, he said, then people are going to be able to prosecute these guys in Europe because the evidence is all out there. And that's correct. As more and more information comes out and these memos come out, we're going to continue to pursue efforts in Europe and pursue prosecution at home. The Center actually currently has a campaign, if people go to our website, to actually tell Leahy, this is not enough, we want prosecution.
Where is Donald Rumsfeld?
Well, he and Rice, right? They're, what is California? What is, like a magnet for right-wingers? They're both at the, what is it now, on this campus of Stanford? What's it called? The Hoover Institution? Yeah. So they're there, or they're going there, Rice and Rumsfeld, and they're going to be some kind of scholars in residence at Stanford, at the Hoover Institution, and there's apparently a protest that was starting either yesterday or today objecting to that. So, maybe we can all get them into a corner of Orange County and actually give them their own country and just put prison walls around it. I'm not sure, Amy.
And are there other countries that are pursuing a possible prosecution against any of these Bush administration officials?
Well, I think right now what's happening is they're going to wait and see what Obama does. If Obama doesn't do anything in the next few months, I think there's going to be a huge push in Europe. At the same time, there is stuff going on in Europe, and that's when there's conduct or illegalities on the country itself, they don't have to wait for the United States. So you have investigation that we've talked about here in Italy of the CIA agents going on who kidnapped Egyptian cleric off the street. In Spain, you have a... Explain that.
You have CIA officers being tried in absentia in Italy.
That's correct. There were 24 CIA officers involved in a conspiracy to kidnap an Egyptian cleric off the streets of Milan. There's an independent prosecutor in Italy who has been running a trial now for probably a year or more, in which testimony is being taken on what those CIA agents have done. I think there's arrest warrants issued for a number of those people throughout Europe. So that's one relatively successful effort in Italy. And again, if you look at it, they actually kidnapped someone and violated the sovereignty of Italy, so they went after them.